Hello, I'm Lucy from Bookess, and today I am reviewing Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak. I had been waiting so long to read this book because way back, probably not long after it came out, I read The Book Thief, which is a book that has had such stratospheric success. The critics loved it, but more importantly, the readers loved it. Hollywood loved it, and it was being absolutely everywhere for well over a decade. And in that last decade and a bit, actually Markus Zusak has been writing a really, really long book to follow it up, which was Bridge of Clay. And I had been looking forward to it lots and lots and lots, so I went into it obviously with some pretty high expectations and quite a lot of bias, and there were things about this book that I really, really liked, and there were things that actually frustrated me quite a lot. It is very different from The Book Thief, and what I think I'll do is I will take you through. I'll tell you a little bit what it's about, and then I shall tell you what I loved and maybe what I perhaps didn't like quite so much. But before I do, I will just say as well that we have loads of reviews on this channel, so if you are new in finding us, please do subscribe if you are into book reviews from a whole load of genres. And also we do a weekly bookish chats where we sort of cover the big news topics of the week and tell you what we're reading, so if that sounds good, please do subscribe. Right, this book, would you like to know what it's about? It is a multi-generational family saga, and it centres around 5 brothers, the Dunbar brothers, and their mother has died recently, and their father, well, actually not that recently. I'll come back to that. Okay, time jumps around really quite a lot. 5 Dunbar brothers are the centre of this story. Their mother has died and their father is absent. At the start of the novel, at least, we do not know where he is or why he is absent. But what pushes sort of the central story to the fore is his return. And he comes back to the family home, and he is met in sort of very different ways by these 5 brothers. Some of them are more pleased to see him than others, but he comes with a single request, which is that they help him to build a bridge in the Australian outback where he has been living. And only one of these brothers decides to take up the challenge. The story itself is told through the perspective of the eldest brother, Matthew, and he is recounting really his family's story, committing it to paper on a typewriter. So in a very conscious way, he is telling us the story of his family, but mostly the story of the one brother who decides to go and build this bridge. So his name is Clay. And what this novel then does is take the story of Clay and weave in all the other bits of their family's history. So his parents, the brother's mother and father, both from their childhood right up to sort of where we leave them in the story in their various ways, and also sort of chucking in other bits of I guess world history a little bit, but also each of these 5 other brothers and how they have sort of survived through the turmoil that is their family's history. And by committing it all to paper, what they're really doing, what Matthew is doing, and what he is recounting others in his family doing, is dealing with grief. So this is a book where the main theme is how we deal with grief and loss, and actually the state of obsession that it can often send us into. It's a really complex and slow-paced book, which is just replete with metaphors and symbolism and allusions to epic Greek poetry. And the narrative itself is actually really fragmented. It jumps around between person and between place and between strands of time as well, sometimes as frequently as between paragraphs. So in a way, you see an enormous amount of different things going on, but particularly at the start of this book, because of this fragmented narrative and all these jumps, I did find it hard to follow. Once the book had progressed to a point where I was grounded in the characters and in the place a little bit more, I didn't feel so lost by the jumps. But there's certainly times early on in this book, and given that it's quite a large book actually, early on stretches quite a long way, that I did feel lost and I didn't quite know where I was. The prose itself is also kind of fragmented too, I guess, actually. There's an awful lot of will they, won't they, or did they, didn't they, and also should they, shouldn't they, and things like this. So we're left faced with questions that we don't immediately get the answers to. And again, that adds to the sense of leaving the reader, or leaving me at least, a little bit lost in the narrative, a little bit rootless about where I was at times, which I didn't always love. I actually think, in a way, that style of writing has got a lot of similarities to what Zusak did in The Book Thief, and it's sort of been pushed, I think, a little bit more to the extreme in this book. It's sort of been made even more stylized, and some people, I think, will absolutely love it, but if it does frustrate you sort of early on in the book, that sort of bitty, chopped up prose, that is going to carry on for the entire book. For me, actually, once I'd sort of got into it, again, it wasn't something that bothered me. Something that did bother me slightly more about this book was the foreshadowing that went on, because this book, again, has absolutely loads of it in the first half. We are constantly told, about the things that are going to happen, or things that are hinted at, with ever out actually sort of the reveal being an incredibly long way away. This sounds like I'm being terribly negative, but actually the back end of the book is really, really fabulous. But in the first half, we are so frequently told that we need to wait for something to happen. We're so deliberately and explicitly told that we're going to get information that you couldn't help feeling a little bit strung along at times. And I know that the purpose of it, the intention of it, is to build that intrigue. But for me, at times, it tipped from intrigue into frustration. And I did think, come on, just get on with it. Tell us what it is that you're setting us up for in so many ways. The strength of this novel, for me, however, was not so much the characters, these 5 Dunbar brothers and the boys, the other family members that they interacted with, but actually the interactions themselves. So the characters, when they were talked about on their own, were fine, but when they came into their own was when they were interacting with the other characters. You sort of had these not average people, but that when they collided, just the sparks were what made this novel really, really exciting. So particularly for me, the relationship between Clay and his mother, and between Clay and his sort of kind of little bit girlfriend Carey, they were just really fabulous relationships. But also between the 5 brothers themselves. So each of them on their own sort of didn't almost feel like a whole person, but when you put them together in this house, which was just kind of feral and chaotic, and completely without parents and in total survival mode, they just had the most brilliant relationship, really sparky relationships, that made them all sort of more than the sum of their parts, which I absolutely loved, and which was my favourite thing about this novel, hands down. It's worth saying actually that as this is narrated by one of the brothers, the eldest brother, and it kind of actually has elements of all the different bits that I've just said in this point, is that he's narrating a story which primarily isn't about him, and which, for big chunks of it, he wasn't even present at. And he's telling us about how his brother thought, and how his parents thought in their minds about things that happened before he was born, and things he couldn't possibly know. And towards the end of the novel, Zusak puts in things that did make that believable and made me accept it. But for a big chunk of the novel, I was thinking, he's telling a story he can't possibly know in this way. How is he doing it? And that did sort of throw me out of it. I sort of was conscious of the author talking, I think, rather than the character talking about other characters in a believable way. So that again was something that did niggle at me. It is pretty melodramatic. It totally romanticizes pretty extreme violence and extreme neglect. It is overlong and at times quite indulgent in the prose. I definitely think that some of it could have been lost, and it actually wouldn't have been a loss, if you know what I mean. So it did require me to have some serious patience for the first half of this book. And I have to say, I did consider whether I was going to continue reading it. I did think, is this going to be one I DNF'd? But I persevered, and I am really glad that I did. And I'm aware that I've just spoken for all those minutes about all the things that I didn't like. And before I came on to film this, I stopped and I tried to find the words for the reasons that I did like it, because on balance, actually, this was a good book when I persevered. And the reason is because of the absolute emotional punch that it packs in the second half. You are strung along and strung along and strung along and wound up to the point of frustration, but then it does deliver on all the things that it promises. When it's telling you, oh, this story is going to break your heart, and it tells you that 15 times, you're like, is it really? But then it does. The emotion that Zusak manages to put into the second half of this book totally made it worth persevering through the very slow, bit frustrating first half. And it all came down again to the interactions between the characters for me that delivered on that promise. And I guess, calling him a bit melodramatic and a bit indulgent, and it is, but those things do all feed in to creating this overarching super emotional wallop at the end. And it's a bit of Hollywood, really, isn't it? Sometimes you're being manipulated, but you still get sucked in and really, really enjoy it nevertheless. So overall, it's a pretty good read. It's not one I think that is going to change my life. It is not The Book Thief, unfortunately, and I think if you're looking for that, you possibly might be a little bit disappointed, but overall it's definitely worth sticking with. It's also worth saying, actually, thinking about it, that I've seen in the UK this has been marketed as an adult novel, and I believe that in the US it's been marketed at a slightly younger audience, maybe young adult audience, more like The Book Thief. But to me, this is definitely an adult novel. It has really adult themes in it, even though the central characters are teenagers. I think the overall style of the writing, the themes that it addresses, and the way in which it does that, I would put at a more adult market than young adult. That's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's merely sort of just me telling you, in case you're trying to work out whether this book is for you. So there you have it. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this novel, I really do, but on the whole, pretty much that's it. I want to say, if you like this book, try Bridge of Clay, but actually, it's kind of unlike anything else I can think I've read, really. So I think brownie point for that at the very, very least. So there you have it, Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak. If you have read this book, or you want to read this book, or you have thoughts about this book that you'd like to share, I would love to hear them. So please do talk to me in the comments below. In the meantime, check out bookaxe.com and the apps. They're completely free, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.